growth is always important. You know, whether you're retired or not, you always want to see your money growing.
But I looked at it and went, hey, man, if this family is used to spending a couple $100,000 a year and you have $1 million, all of a sudden it sounds like you got about 5 years to go.
What happened in 2008, as we all know, the market crash.
Stocks, bonds, and money market. So
Yeah.
you had this equity, you had debt, and then you had cash.
You know, we've all heard the word diversified. But what does that really mean?
All of them have these big companies.
Yeah, so I'm Dustin Stanley, and I just founded a firm. It's called Stanley Wealth and Retirement. And it's kind of a long story as to how I got into this business. But I mean, you've known me for a lot of years, but growing up, I was in my family business. So we were a metal fab shop, laser cutting. Most people don't know what that is, but we would make gadgets. You know, we would make metal things. And so from 12 years old, you know, I would go to work with my dad every day and in the summer months, and you know, I just did that so I could be with my dad, and he was bringing me because I was free labor. You know, he was just starting out as a company, and I grew up through the business to where, you know, as a 15-year-old, I started welding, and then as a 16-year-old, I was a machine operator, and then it kind of evolved through the different processes in the business to where I eventually became vice president of the company, and that was what I thought I was going to do. You know, I worked there for 24 years, and you know, we went through the 2008 financial crisis. And I remember at that time, my mom and dad had a financial advisor, and he would come in and he actually did our 401k. He did everything for our company as well. And so I would see him 2 or 3 times a year where he would come in and give advice, or he would buy us lunch. And I remember in 2008, my mom had just retired from UPS. So she worked there for 40 years. In 2007, she retires. Dad was going to follow 1 year later. So he was going to retire in 2008, and I was going to basically take over the business at that point. And this particular day that this advisor came over, they went into Dad's office and they shut the door. And they were in there for, I don't know, probably an hour, I would say. And when the guy left, my dad's face was white as a ghost. And I mean, it was an eye-opening moment for me. I was just like, what's going on? What's happening? And I could just tell Dad was stressed. I mean, he was able to handle things like a champ all the time. So this day when I went into his office and I was like, what's going on? He said, well, you know, everything that your mom and I have been planning for is off. It's not going to happen. So they'd spent their whole lives. She worked at UPS for 40 years. They've been stacking money away in their 401k. They've been, you know, he's been putting money away since he started the business. And, you know, some years were good, some years were bad, but he was able to put some money away, and they were going to retire and start doing those things that they wanted to do. They had bought a big travel trailer behind their dually, and they were going to go to all the national parks and go travel around the country. And what happened in 2008, as we all know, the market crashed, but their advisor would just keep telling Dad. And I remember hearing Dad call him and saying, you know, hey, shouldn't we be moving things off, you know, into cash right now, or shouldn't we be
kind of like diversifying or restructuring?
Dad was nervous, thinking, you know, here I'm retiring next year. Shouldn't we be making changes? And the advisor kept telling him, oh, don't worry. This is just a paper loss. It'll come back. Don't worry about this. It'll come back. It always does. And, you know, it's just a paper loss. This isn't real, you know. And so, of course, Dad's following his advice because this guy's his advisor, and he never made any changes. He never changed anything until here Dad had lost 50-60% of his portfolio. So now retirement was not just no longer next year. Now it was, is it even going to happen? You know, is it even on the table for Mom and Dad at all to be able to retire? And so, I was just like, what do you mean? How does this happen? What went on? And so we had another friend of ours that was a good friend of Mom and Dad's that was telling Dad, you need to change things. You need to move this, move that. And so that was why, you know, Dad was reaching out to his advisor. But come to find out, the friend of my parents, they had been working with someone that really worked with retirees more so than just the accumulation phase. So when it comes to investing, there's 2 distinct phases. So you've got what's called the accumulation phase, which is where you're taking a lot of risk. You're grow, grow, grow. That's all you're worried about is dollar cost averaging, putting money in every month, taking advantage of the volatility that's happening in the market. So that's called the accumulation phase. Then once you get 5 to 10 years out from retirement, now you're entering what's called the distribution phase. And so what's supposed to happen is there needs to be a paradigm shift in not just your mode of thinking, but also in your investments. So you need to start putting safety nets in place. You need to start pulling some money off the table and putting it into things that are safer than a growth stock. And so that's what, Dad was being told by his buddy is, hey, isn't your advisor making these changes? And so Dad was pressuring his advisor to do so. But what ended up coming out of this is the advisor that we had been working with for the company's 401k, he didn't know what he was doing when it comes to retirement planning. He was just an accumulation advisor. So here he's telling him it's just a paper loss. It's just, so the advisor that gets you to your retirement is never going to be the one that gets you through it. So it's two totally different types of planning tools, investments. And so when that happened and I saw the impact that it had on my parents, which they didn't retire until many, many years later. And when I went into this business, I was actually able to help them retire. So I menteed underneath of a super sharp guy, and he helped me learn the industry and learn how to handle retirees. And so when I saw my parents go through that, and I saw what this accumulation advisor did to their future, that was when I really thought, man, this is what I want to do. I want to be able to help people never go through what my parents went through. There's a statistic right now, 2 out of 3 people retiring are not retiring with enough money to maintain their standard of living and then make it to their life expectancy.
That's a major fear, right?
Yeah.
That's a major thing. You and I were talking before, and I remember looking at life, just looking at some things, and I'm just using round numbers, but if you've worked hard your whole life and you look up and say, okay, I've got $1 million right here, but between vacations, the kids, this and that or whatever, my wife and I, we spend about $200,000 a year between our 2 salaries. Mm-hmm. We want to retire.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get a pension. Eventually, you're going to get some Medicare.
Yeah.
Things of that nature. But I looked at it and went, "Hey, man, if this family is used to spending a couple $100,000 a year, and you have $1 million, all of a sudden it sounds like you got about 5 years to go." This is a real thing, right? So you have to find, what are you going to do with all the stuff you've accumulated, mm-hmm. and then you're going to put it over here. You said distribution, meaning you're going to put your money to work for you?
Yeah. So instead of, growth is always important. Whether you're retired or not, you always want to see your money growing, and you want to see it. You want to make sure that you're living off of just maybe the dividends and the income that your portfolio is generating. So meaning, if you've got $1 million portfolio, for example, like you just said, if you spent $200,000 a year, you're right. You'd be out of money in about 5 years. You might be able to stretch it to 7, I'd say at the most, but you're going to be out of money pretty quick. Realistically, there's what's called a safe withdrawal rate, and AARP did a study back in the 90s, and what they found is that if you were using the old 60-40 split, stocks and bonds, or then what they said at that time is that you could generate about 4% per year, and statistically, you should never run out of money. So you had like a 90+% success rate. So let's think about that, though. In the 1990s, the stock market was averaging over 13% a year. This was the .com. This was the one of the best times in the stock market's history, where it was just taking off like a rocket. So the market was averaging over 13. The bond market in the 90s was averaging about 6%. And at that time, 4% was a safe withdrawal rate. And so we fast forward to now, and the stock market's not averaging anywhere near that. I think we're a little over 8% is what the market's averaging right now. And then the bond market's averaging around 3%. So that safe withdrawal rate, you want to take a guess what it is now?
1%?
You're pretty close. It's around 2.5% now. So if you have $1 million, if you're using the old 60-40 stocks and bonds split, like a lot of people probably listening to this, they were taught by their parents or their grandparents, you want 60-40 or, stocks versus bonds. Well, if you do that, it will work if you're okay with pulling 2.5% a year out of your portfolio. But I've never met somebody that has $2 million that says they're okay with pulling 50 grand a year out.
That's a problem.
Yeah. So, there's still ways to get to 4 and 5 and even close to 6%, but it's not using the old 60-40 stocks and bonds split. So, the world has evolved. Investments have too. So you've got to evolve with the times and stay up with the new investments and new strategies and new tools that can get you to the 4, 5, and even close to 6% withdrawal rates.
And most people would know this, but you're actually my financial advisor.
Yeah.
And, I've been doing some research here lately. You've got me reading some books, teaching me a lot of things.
Yeah.
And I saw a chart the other day. I haven't even had a chance to talk to you about it, but I wanted you to just comment on it. You mentioned the 60-40 split, right? Mm-hmm. So I saw a chart, and I don't know how to average it out for my age or my income or whatever, but it said, stocks, bonds, and money market. So you had this equity, you had debt, and then you had cash instruments, right? Yeah. So is there a good way to break that down? Or just for somebody like me, not anybody, everybody's different, right?
Yeah.
Every investment, every person has to find what works for them. But for me, if you're looking at me, how would I break that down, by age or what?
So a general rule of thumb that I like to use is something called the rule of 100, and it's really simple. It's basically whatever your age is. That's the percentage of your portfolio that you want to be in a safer position. That doesn't mean to put it in money market. That doesn't mean to put it in cash. When I say safer, if someone is 45 years old, 47 years old, then you don't want to put 47% in cash. You would want that 47% somewhere that's averaging, let's say, 6 to 10% a year. So, it's a conservative type of investment. It's not going to set the world on fire, but that's not the purpose. You want a good solid foundation in place so that you can take a lot of risk with the rest of it and possibly get those home run type of investment returns. So a good rule of thumb would be whatever your age is, that's the percent that you want safe and in a position that's not going to take a huge loss. Let's say a 2008 happens again, or a black swan event like COVID happens again. You've got several years. You've got a lot of years until you're going to get Social Security and retire and be, on those trips, on the Viking cruises and things like that. You get a lot of years before you're going to be doing that. So you can still take quite a bit of risk, but those that are approaching retirement or close to or already in retirement, now you've got to really get close to adhering right on the rule of 100. So with you, you could vary 10%. So you could have maybe only 40% safe, or you could go as much as 60% safe. But, someone that's 60 years old, 65 years old, they really shouldn't vary that much away from the rule of 100.
Right. You wouldn't want to, if somebody's at that age and they need income right now, you're not going to take on a long play on a security for 20 years from now with somebody 65 years old. That wouldn't make sense, right?
Exactly.
So, how do, when I came to you, I have a similar story in that my mother worked at a factory all her life. She saved up, had about $500,000 in her 401k. And I remember she talked to my stepfather at some point. She's like, you know what? I should take that out and put it over here somewhere. Talk to an advisor or something. He said, no, leave it in the company. Right? Okay. 9/11 hit.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
It's last time I spoke to her about it. We haven't spoken about it in years, but she told me, she's like, I had $500,000. And she was like, I had that for you.
Yeah.
And she said, there might be 30 grand in there.
Oh,
the stock tanked that bad at 9/11, right? And I was thinking about that. I'm like, she knew I better move this, right? And then my stepfather, loved the guy who's not an advisor, said, no, don't move it. And she went, oh, okay, right? So here we are, $500,000 loss later, right?
Man.
And I wonder, as I'm in business, I've worked at companies, I've had my own companies and this and that, and I noticed that people end up with, they kind of tell me, they go like, well, I have an IRA thing over here from this job. My wife used to work over there and had a 401k, but I'm not sure what's in it. And then she's got this new job, but we didn't roll it over. She's in a new 401k now. And then somebody, some estate money was left to her and this and that. They seem to be all over the place. Is that a normal thing? Is that the type of people you talk to?
Every day. So that's what I see every single day is you'll have somebody that's worked at, let's say, 3 or 4 different places. Let's say a nurse, for example. This is one, nurses move around different hospitals a lot. That's a common that I see. And so they'll have, let's say, 4 403B accounts at 4 different hospitals. And, and they feel like because they've got these several different accounts, they think that they're diversified because, we've all heard the word diversified. But what does that really mean? To those that are not educated in the financial services industry or not really savvy as far as finances go, diversification, you want a lot of assets in different asset classes. So you want some in real estate, some in commodities, some in stocks, some in bonds. So diversification, you want across all these different asset classes, where someone that has a lot of different accounts, so 403B here, a 401k there, an IRA here, they don't have necessarily diversification. What we find oftentimes is they have what's called overlap. And basically what I mean by overlap is if you look at a 401k or a 403B and you really start examining what is in it, what are the options? You just said it a while ago. You have 3 options. You might have 60 different variations of these 3 options, but you have cash or money market, you have stock funds, equity, or you have bond funds, debt. Mm-hmm. So no matter where you look, if you've got 60 different funds, it's one of those 3 options. So if we go in and we look at a stock fund, for example, and we look at the holdings inside of that stock fund, you've got a 403B here with this fund, this fund, this fund. So you've got a bunch of different funds thinking, hey, I'm diversified. But when we look inside of that fund, they all hold the same positions.
All of them have these big companies.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has Apple.
Yeah.
Every single one of them has Amazon.
Exactly.
Every single one of them has Microsoft.
Yep.
And that's it. So you're not diversified at all.
Correct. You're not diversified. You're in the same position over and over and over and over again.
So that seems to be a common thread, though, and that's the type of client that you service, right?
I see it every day.
It's all over the place, right?
That's exactly right.
Whenever somebody comes to Stanley Wealth, right, and they're like, "I've got these accounts," what's the first step? What do you do?
Well, the first step is just to sit down and listen. And if you go to one of the big brokerage houses, which if I said any of the names, you would recognize them, they already have a product or a service or something that they know that they're going to sell to the client before they even meet the client. Well, the way that I do things is completely different, completely the opposite of that. I always want to listen to what is the client's goals? What are they trying to accomplish? How comfortable are they with risk? I said there's a baseline look or a guideline looking at the rule of 100, which is whatever your age is, that's the percentage you want safe. But some clients, that doesn't fit them at all. So, we've always got a baseline of where we would start, but it all is going to be individualized based on the family's discussions with me. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sit down and we're just going to talk and just find out what are you trying to accomplish and where are you in life? And really, I just want to understand your specific goals, and then I'm going to design a strategy and a portfolio that's going to match and help you meet and accommodate those goals.
Well, as you know, I've been reading the securities licensing exam manual a little bit.
Yeah, a lot of fun, right?
That's the way it's supposed to be, right?
Yeah.
Am I reading this correctly? Everybody's different. Everybody's individualized. You have to go with their time horizon, their risk tolerance. What do they want to do? And if what I'm reading in the book's correct, even if a client tells you, hey, place an order for this stock right here, and it's going to lose right now, you have to place the order for them because they told you to, right?
You're exactly right. Yeah.
So that makes sense. But it doesn't make sense, actually, that you would have a firm or a place that has a one-size-fits-all. That's actually the opposite of what the SEC is aiming at. I mean, like having a one-size-fits-all option?
Yeah. You would think that, yes, you are right. That's what's supposed to happen, is that you're supposed to listen to the client and understand their goals, in particular if you're a fiduciary. With investment advisors and brokers, there's 2 different standards of advice that an advisor can follow. One standard is called the Suitability standard. And what that means is they do have to recommend investments that are suitable. So they have to listen to a client. They have to recommend something that's suitable. But a fiduciary advisor, now they are held to a totally different standard. Now they morally, legally, ethically, they have to recommend what is in their client's best interest in order to help reach whatever that goal is the client has.
So you're saying there's different types of advice. That's how people are ending up with stuff all over the place, where they're ending up in the situation your parents were in, where it's like, no, hold the line, hold the line. And then when something happens, they weren't exactly a fiduciary.
Exactly.
But you are.
Yeah, I'm a fiduciary, as well as every advisor at Stanley Wealth and Retirement is a fiduciary.
Right on. So if somebody wanted to get a hold of you, how would they reach out to Stanley Wealth?
Yeah, so you can look us up online, StanleyRetirement.com, and just check us out there, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. And on social media as well, everywhere?
We're everywhere. Everywhere you get your podcast and everywhere on social media.
All right. Thanks, Dustin. I appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me,
All right.
Jim.